What a pleasure to be here. And it is quite daunting because if you travel throughout the world and you travel more than 1,000 kilometers, they think you're a guru. They think you know something. But if you're at home, they say, it's just old Gustav living there, we know him, and what is there to say? And especially where we speak about the vow today. This is even more daunting because when your wife is present, then you must be very careful if you speak about the vow. Now, today is about the wow of the vow. So how many people really feel that they have a wow in their vow? You've said this vow so long ago. Oh, fantastic. Come on, give the hands, give the hands. So lots of people experience the wow and the vow. But it didn't come by itself. I think you probably worked on it. And I just wonder, those people who have the wives are saying things there, those people who have the vow, or the wow in the vow, I wonder how long it took. Those first 2 years. Yesterday I sat and I spoke at the Rhema Women's Conference, and there were a panel discussion, and these were people who were just married 1 year, 2 years, and you could see the stresses and strains. The shorter they married, you can actually see the stress, how they're still finding each other. And now these older, mature relationships, how people actually found each other and how good it was. So today is about the wow in the vow. But what does vow mean? Vow is a solemn promise. Vow is, if you go to the definition of the vow, it's a solemn promise. It's a solemn promise that you actually want to do something, that there's something. Because one person, Alphonse von Steenwegen, he was a Belgian guy, he wrote a book, Love is a Verb. It is not a noun. So a vow is actually a verb. It's something, a promise that you do something. But what is wow? It is a sensational success. It is a sensational success that you actually say that from this vow that I actually make something very, very special out of it. But we all know that this vow and this wow is not always the last word. It can also turn into a third word with a W, called the woe. So, what does woe mean? Woe means great sorrow and distress. So many people have actually tried this endeavor and it ended up in woe. I mean, in Hamlet, I remember it was my school Shakespeare play, and in Hamlet Act 3, Scene 1, they actually says, woe is me to see what I see. And isn't this the case? Sometimes you perhaps grew up in a marriage where there was no wow, where there was only woe. And probably it had a good influence on you because very often we see the sorrow and we see all the pain. And then what happens? Thank you, Nandi. This is wow, to be in the family. Thank you so much. And to see the sorrow and to see the pain and to see how things didn't work up and see how parents actually tried their utmost but just couldn't get it right. And probably in your own mind, you made a few commitments in your own mind and say, I don't want to repeat these mistakes. If I do it one day, I want to get it right. But very often there are also people here who in good faith tried this endeavor of getting married and saying the vow. But due to all sorts of not so good things like unfaithfulness and things like this vow turns really into deep sorrow and you experience the woe. Now, very often the woe is not always the fault of somebody else because there is a mistake people make. There's actually a fourth word starting with a W, and it is woo. So because the reason why this vow turns into woe is very often because people only focus on woo. What does woo stand for? Winning others over. Woo is just this whole thing of trying to gain the love of a person. Because if you're a suitor, you try to gain the love of this person. You try to impress this person and say, listen, I'm good, and I want you to marry me. But very often, that just turns into this whole thing of that you're faking your best. And once the things are together, then the true colors come out. So the problem is very often that we just focus on winning other person over. But my real point to you today is that if you really want to put the wow in your vow and not end up with any woes and not just focus on woo, But how do we do that? And this is perhaps the secret, that if we find the why and the how of marriage, then something is going to happen in our lives. And if we focus then on the how, and today I'm going to focus very much on the how. Being a marriage counselor, I was the company counselor for Sasol for a number of years, and the company allowed me to do marriage counseling because when there's relationship issues, people actually, it interferes with their productivity. So the company actually allowed me to do hardcore marriage counseling, being a company counselor, because it just takes all your focus away if you have problems at home and things doesn't happen the correct way. Now, the thing that I think that we realize is the problem in life, if we go to the next slide, is that the problem we have in our lives is that we want to find the right person. And I think the reason why so many marriages fail is people are looking for the right person. You know, I always ask people, what if you find the perfect person and that person realizes you're not perfect? So for the whole life, you're looking for this perfect person. And the thing I realized in life is that if you really look for this perfect person and the checklists and everything, you want to find the right person, and you forget to ask the question, am I the right person? Is the real question not perhaps to be the right person? Now, to share something, I married quite late in life, and I was sitting one day, and I was a little bit sad and a little bit alone and feeling, I don't have a partner, and traveling the world and see all these things and nobody to share it with, and wondered why the relationships didn't work out. But for a good reason, God allowed the things not to work out. Because I remember one day vividly, I was sitting in the south of Spain after finishing some seminars there all by myself, and I see all these couples. It was this fantastic night in Mias, tucked away on the mountain there, and the Mediterranean Sea shoreline was there, and it was like a mirror of the Mediterranean. It was the most romantic setting you can get, and I was there all by myself. All by myself, you know that one. And all by myself, and usually I had this very deep sorrow and sadness for myself and say, why is it that I don't have a partner? But at that very day, something very special happened. I was sitting there and the romantic couples were coming in there in Spain, and for one moment I realized, after the processes God took me through, that at that moment I felt 100% happy. I was so happy for the other couples, I felt happy myself, and then I realized, you know what, I don't actually need somebody to be happy, and I actually felt that this is good. And that moment I realized that I didn't realize it because I only realized it 6 weeks later when I met my wife, that God said, Gustav, you must never marry to be happy. You must first be happy and then you must be allowed to marry. Because if you're not whole in yourself, you will put the weight on another person to make you happy. And that person will never shape up to that standard. And that person will never be beautiful enough. And then you have to trade that person. So, no, you're not making me happy anymore. I must get another person to make me happy and all of this. If you don't carry happiness in yourself, and I realized God told me then that, Gustav, you must first be happy. I just took you to that moment where you were happy in yourself, and then I could actually give you a wife, because then you will not mess up this relationship. And probably I realized this is why other previous relationships didn't work. Now, where does it start? It usually starts with a thing like this. It usually starts when a man goes down on his knees, and then when you find the right person, and this is exactly what we did. You sort of buy this ring, and even if you don't have lots of money, you at least get a small little ring, one like this. And then you go down on your knees, and this is exactly what I did. Really, too. My wife is an introvert. She was really not impressed with me. But we did it there literally. I hired this boat and wanted to go out on a dinner cruise outside Cape Town Harbor. It was such a stormy night. It was a dark and stormy night, yes it was. So that the boat actually just crisscrossed in the harbor. So I know exactly where I got married. It was somewhere there at the Seals, somewhere there. But whatever your story was, you go down on your knees and you say, people, even if you don't have money, some people pay lobola. I don't know where this De Beers company got us to buy diamonds. I think they messed us up here. And then some people have to pay dowry. But now you take this diamond, and even your honor as a man is, even if you don't have money, even if it's the smallest of 0.1111 pointer diamond, you will put it in there, and you will have a perfectly shaped diamond, the best one you can afford. You will mount it. No honorable man will take an uncut diamond, mount it, and give it to his wife. So you have honor. You want to give this brilliant thing to your wife. And then I very often ask, and I look at people in my consulting room and I say, what's the use of giving a perfectly shaped diamond? But what does the guy behind the diamond look like? Is he a perfectly shaped diamond? So what are you offering your wife? Something beautiful. And the person behind it? Does he have sharp edges? Are you a bit of a rough diamond? And let's not be sexist here. The woman with a ring on her finger, what's the use of that? You're carrying this perfectly shaped diamond. But do you have sharp edges? How sharp is your tongue? How sharp is your life, your personality? Do you have edges that actually hurt other people? And that is perhaps the real question. I think the reason why the wow turns into woe is that, and not wow, is because people focus so much on the diamond and not on the person behind the diamond. You know, the interesting thing is, and this is the day not only just for married couples and for single people, we must all sit here. It's not just for married people here today, because there are lots of people. There are two valid lifestyles on earth, single life and married life. And guess what? We are all, at any stage in your lives, everybody is single. You're not born married. You're single for a time, and then you're married, and then somebody passes away, and then you're single again. So you must be able to be single. And what do? Whether you're single or married, the principles still say the same. Do you have sharp edges? So use your time to actually be ready. I got some great wisdom. I was working on this program on marriage preparation, and my wife just told me, said, Gustav, and she shared an amazing bit of wisdom with me. She said, you know, we all in churches go for marriage preparation. But he said, it's then too late. When the date is fixed, when the venue is booked, it's too late. It is actually, you should start, because what if you find at that moment that things are not right? And then she came up with this idea that we must do marriage preparation while you're single and don't even have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Because then you must clarify and make sure that you do not look for the right person, but that you are the right person. And so what I'm saying here, you're a man of worth, you're a woman of worth. People are made of the right stuff. God affirmed you as a woman and a man of worth. But God also said, become holy and become better, and that we must really shape ourselves, that we can grow to become His image and not just be the rough diamond. The other reason why people actually have a problem in not finding the wow in this whole thing of marriage is because they do not only just focus on the diamond, they focus all on the day. You know what I see with people is that they just focus all on the day. All the things from a little girl, it is the day, it is the dress, it is the this. I sit there and I wonder, now, what about the days afterwards? So just focusing on the day, you must not only focus on the day, what about the practical daily living afterwards? What about, I always say there are always 10 or 20 people that should not be on your wedding. You wouldn't have liked them to be there. So just cut them out, take that money and spend it on wedding preparation. So you spend all this money on this day, and what about the rest? Where's the preparation for this? And this is why people don't really experience what they have to do. And the further reason is that people don't realize the purpose of a wedding. Marriages are God's plan for creating healthy societies, and that you in this healthy society mirror something of the Father heart of God and actually our relationship with Him. You know, what is the purpose? We must find the why. And obviously today I'm not going to focus on the why. But if we go further and we focus on the why, and if you go to the next slide, the why of the marriage, you find, amongst other places, in Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9 to 11, that there you read that two are actually faring better than one. And if one falls, the other one can help him up. People, this is why we need each other. This is why, if you go to the first text in Genesis, which was in Genesis 2, which is also mirrored in Mark 10, that you see, but God made us man and woman, and He gave us to each other so that we can become one. And oh my, wasn't I as a young man? I mean, this leaving part was okay for me, but that cleaving part, oh man, that was very interesting for me. I was so looking forward to that. So this leaving and cleaving. Why? Because Adam was alone. Adam was alone, and you need this. And God created us man and woman for us to be together and to be together a winning team. This is quite interesting that even in the Roman Catholic Church, this very perfect union between a man and woman symbolizes something. And God says it's not about the man and the woman. It is symbolizing everything that is all about this thing between the relationship between Christ and the church. And if you go to the Catholic Church, we've got in most churches 2 sacraments, baptism and the Eucharist. Nochmal. But in the Catholic Church, they call marriage a sacrament. You know what is a sacrament? It is a sign. It is a sign that people must see. They must look at your marriage, and you must actually look at you and see this is how God handles His church. And very often it's a wake-up call for me that if I look in the mirror and say, if people look at my marriage, do they actually see God? Do they see God's relationship? And would God have such a sharp tongue, or do such a bad thing, or do an obnoxious thing? And very often that is the reminder that God gave our marriages not only to our children to be as examples to them, but also to the world outside to actually mirror something of this relationship. But today I presuppose, and because there are good teachings that you've received over many years, I presuppose that you know the biblical foundation of faith. Currently, we're expanding our house, and what we're doing is we're trying to build something. Now, it's beyond the foundation phase. If we just constantly repeat the foundation, this is the reason for marriage, and this is good, it's okay, very well, it's very important. But the rest of the thing must be built. We must build this marriage. And I spend my daily lives my days of my life, specifically to help people and to sit over many years, to sit with people and to say, but how do you make this thing possible? You know, people are very practical. They say, it's fantastic, I would like to do it, just show me how. And this is the need that people have, that we can find, but how do we do this? How is it possible? You know, the how is actually quite not so obvious, because on the one hand, you see the text there. In Proverbs, you say, a wife finds what is good and receives favor from God. But Proverbs 12 also said, a wife of noble character is her husband's crown, but a disgraceful wife is a decay to his bones. Sometimes people don't get the how right. We have the foundation. We know it's a good thing. But how do we get this right? How do we become the people that we can become? And this is where I would like to take you to a few practical examples of people that struggled with this and that I had the privilege of rubbing shoulders with, and I've learned so many things from them. And from that I one day sat and I realized, but why is it some people get it right? Why is it some marriages actually do work? And why is it some marriages don't work? And I sat one day, I was a little bit down in my consulting room, and I sat there and I said, no, what are the things that 10 years, 17 years, 30 years down the line end up on a table of a typical counselor as the real issues in marriage? And I just did a bit of reverse engineering. Engineers will enjoy this, that I did a bit of reverse engineering and said, what are the real issues ending up on the table? And I realized there were 12 issues. And so on that, I took the issues that were there, and I realized that if you share square meters, this is when you are really getting close to each other. But there was one golden thread through all these 12 issues, and that was expectations. You know, when is a wedding, when is a marriage a good marriage? When you've got expectations, and your expectations are fulfilled, and you're a happy person. When is a marriage not a good marriage? Lady Diana expected her to marry one husband. But after a while, she said, you know what, my expectation that he would be faithful was not really met. And she actually said, this marriage is a bit crowded. There's actually more than one person in this. And once these expectations are not met, isn't it true that if you go on holiday, and you expect 10 sunny days and you leave room for 2 rainy days, and it was 12 rainy days, you say it's a bad holiday. So if the expectation was 12 cozy rainy days, then it would have been a good day. So the thing that I found is that in all things, that the thing that people focuses on in a marriage is the legal contract. You go to your legal practitioner and you say, okay, now let's sort it out. Is it outside of community of property or inside or the cruel or whatever? And that's the only thing. they focus on. But what about the emotional contract? What about the spiritual contract? What about the deal that you must practically make these vows come true? I had one old professor. He said, never, never make a vow to a woman to promise that you will love her if you don't have a lifetime to make that promise true. It was a conservative old piece of biltong of an old professor. But I one day sat in his office, and he was literally if there's a definition of a nerd, that was him. But when his wife, he picked up the phone, those days still they used the handheld phones with a cable on, and his wife phoned. And I just heard how beautifully he spoke to his wife. And I realized, what a man. And this is the guy who said, don't say, I will love you forever if you don't have a lifetime to make these words come true. Now, in order to do that, to clarify these expectations, I just realized now, how can you take these 12 issues and put it in some sort of a plan? Now, if you get married, all of you take your hands like this. Take your hands like this. And remember, those of you who got married, they say, give each other the right hand. And then, so now, okay, give each other the right hand. Why do they say give each other the right hand? Because it's actually weird. You put the ring on the left hand. I've seen the confusion on all brides, and so now you say give each other the right hand, and where's the ring on the left hand? Why do they do this? Because it's the sealing of a contract. If you seal a business deal, you say, okay, let's shake on it. The deal is struck. So it's actually legally the contract. And then I realized if there are 12 things, there are 10 fingers, and 2 rings. So then I thought, now let's make it memorable and make this the happy marriage, a clarifying of expectations on 12 aspects. Let's call it the 10-thing, 2-ring plan for a happy marriage. And I thought I was so proud of this thing, and I worked it out. So it's the 10-thing, 2-ring plan for a happy marriage. And I just thought I was so proud, and I took it to my wife. I should have listened to there was one finger was about communication. I should have drawn up this plan with her and not just on my own. And my wife said, Gustav, you forgot one. I said, no, give it to me. I'll fit it in. I couldn't. And she was actually right. So there's actually a number 13. So now I call it the 10-thing, 2-ring plan for a happy marriage, plus the one I should have asked my wife. So here you have it. But if we really go into the how of a marriage. Now let's take the 2 rings. The first ring of this happy marriage is the ring of faith. People, we all know a family who prays together stays together. We all know the descent. If you marry an unbeliever, the Bible actually said, don't marry an unbeliever. If you actually sit, and you know, I had one couple the other day, they were 2 atheists, and the one converted. And the atheist was so annoyed with his wife that she dared to convert. It was almost breaking up this marriage. So, because how could you now start believing in God? And I thought, I don't have much sympathy with you, my friend. I hope she will work on you and convert you as we go along. So the first thing is the ring of faith. And people, how we must sort these things out, how we must make room for different expressions of faith. People, everybody's got his own way of entering into a relation with God. And therefore, we must respect this and realize that we must actually not say, why do you do it the way you do it? And say, how do you relate to God? Tell me, take me into your world. And how do I do it? I sometimes like medieval cloister music, sitting there like these old choirs singing. I love it. My spirituality is sometimes like this. It's weird for other people. But this is the way in that music I just find something of God. And as a family that you enrich each other. People, I just stuck to my old ways of how I was brought up and say, this is the way to relate to God. If I didn't marry a wife that took me into deeper aspects of experiencing faith, why are you so stuck to your ways and not allow? God gave you this wife to give you also a broader spiritual experience because you're children of the same God and see through her eyes or through his eyes. How do they perceive God and experience God differently? Why don't you just allow that and allow space for that? The second thing is that it is the ring of faithfulness. Now, if you go to the Afrikaans word for marriage, it's the word trou. Now, I'm always intrigued by this thing. Why do they call marriage trou? Isn't marriage about love? You don't say, I'm going to love this person. Then I'm going to trou this person. You know, trou, marriage is more about trou than about love. You can love a lot of people, but you're only getrou, faithful, trustworthy, faithful, the whole thing of fidelity. So I think if you really want to translate this in English, if you say to a lady, kom ons trou, then you say, let's fidelity. I think we must not say, let's make love. You must actually know what you're doing, my friend. You must say, let's fidelity. It actually sounds quite ticklish, but anyway, you fiddle or fidget or I don't know, whatever. But I think this whole thing of that we must realize, and this is what you must realize when you're up to it. If you're single now, you must now listen very carefully. This is marriage preparation for singles. Go through this little list and say, are you up for it? Because this is what it's all about. If you want to, if you talk business language, where I do lots of my work, these are the 12 critical success areas of what the business is you're in, called marriage. And the one is, can you have a shared faith? And the second one is, can you do the faithfulness thing? So marriage is more about fidelity than it is about love. If you go to the next slide, people, if I can take you to my consulting room and just give you the real pain, that sometimes I'm so touched by it, that I see that this person just realizes my husband or my wife is not faithful. And there are varying degrees. It's from just a juicy WhatsApp message to being really, I've seen marriages break up because of a juicy WhatsApp message. And I've seen marriages being healed after a person has been 10 times sexually involved with another person. And I've seen the healing take place. But the one thing I will never forget, and I always get emotional if I just think about that, is the heart sore. This is why my daughter brought me some water now. That you see in the eyes of people that have suffered this pain, that you've perhaps seen in your mother's eyes, that you've seen in the eyes of other people, that people made this promise and they didn't keep it. People, you must just see this enough. And then you will in your own life decide you will never. Hurt a person in the same way. The next thing is not only the ring of fidelity. Now we can go, and obviously I'm not going to go through all the fingers today. But I mean, let's be honest about all of this. The first finger is the thing of money. 50% of marriage quarrels is about money. Money out of the door, very often loved with it. And this whole thing of how do you manage your money? Is it my things, your things? What do you manage? This is something that you have really come to a very practical decision about. Same bank account, same not. I'm not going to go into the detail. That's for another day. But the second thing is, and if we go to the second finger, is, and I'm not going to go deep into the second one, is the second one is the whole thing of intimacy. Intimacy. What is intimacy? What is a marriage? It is just not a glorified friendship. It has got deep levels of intimacy on a physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual base. That intimacy, the greatest joy that we can have with God. In worship, we have intimacy with God. The greatest joy, I always say, the second most ecstatic pleasure is intimacy with your person, the person you love. The greatest joy is intimacy with God itself. But that is the missing link. And sometimes I call it the 4x4 of intimacy. That you have this 4x4 to go on the journey of the road. And if you're married, you say, you've got two. We are so bright and our brains are so nice together. And then we are so praying together a lot. But then you cannot catch up the emotions of the other person. And you really don't know how to manage physical intimacy. And that is that if you hit the dirt road and hit the mud road and hit the sand roads of life, then you really have to have spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and physical intimacy. The other day, Annelies and I were sitting in Menlyn, and it was a good day. One day, we were sitting in Joburg, and I saw an old student friend of mine. They were sitting in the corner of that restaurant, and they didn't speak a word to each other for that whole night. Only spoke to the waiters. I just realized that relationship is dead. And the other day, we sat in Menlyn, and it was in this one coffee shop, and all the people were leaning over on the tables, and they were conversing, and I just realized, wow, these people, they're connecting, they're having emotional intimacy, they're having intellectual intimacy, they're sharing it. People, that's the joy of a marriage. Just one or two other things. The thing about communication is that communication is the immune system of any marriage. I always say a relationship without communication has got AIDS. Because nobody dies of AIDS. There's on no death certificate AIDS. Because AIDS attacks the immune system, and then a smaller other illness actually kills the thing. So communication is the immune system to actually do two things. To get out of the way all the negative things that creep into a marriage, and to positively build the marriage. So very often your quarrels that you have is about the smallest of issues. And if you after a while listen to know what is this all about, then you realize it was of the smallest of issues. But because you couldn't communicate, I call it the broom of a relationships, that you clean out the relationship with good communication. And so small little things is that you do not use you words. The moment say, you are like this, or you are just like your mother, then you realize you've lost it. But the moment, if I tell you, you are like this, you will say, Gustav, do you know what are you? But if I tell you, I feel great today, then you can't quarrel with me. If I say, when you do this, I feel, and this is as the effect of me, I would prefer you too. People's small little communication techniques can turn around a marriage that you, instead of you insulting messages, just give basic messages of this is how what is the effect on me and how things happen. There are so many more things. Let's jump at the different lifestyles. It's always interesting to me if the camping person who loves camping marries the 5-star lap of luxury girl, and how they make their decisions. You know, the thing is, when you come from a family culture and the other person comes from a family culture, and I always see, the funny thing with young couples, they always try to change each other. And then the woman works hard to change the man, and after a while she said, you're not the man I married. So you very often get it right. But fact of the matter is, you come from a place where you played cricket, and he comes from a place where they played rugby. Now you're trying to play tennis with cricket and rugby rules. People were quarreling in my consulting room the other day. I said to them, listen, you can do this for free at home, you know. And at that moment I said, but listen, what you are doing here is you are just trying to say, in my house we did it like this, and in my house we did it like this. You know what I tell them? I said, no, then go back to your houses. Or decide, we're going to have a new house now here. And now let's create a new culture. And what is the culture? It's the way we do things. We don't play rugby or tennis anymore. We play now according to new rules. Further things, if we jump a few, this is the whole thing about boundaries and families and in-laws, and some people call them outlaws. So it is this whole thing of in-laws and boundaries. You know, this is a quite interesting thing. One of the most important lessons I've learned yesterday from that discussion, which I had at that women's conference where men and women were on stage together. This one lady said, and I agreed with her wholeheartedly, she said, you know, if you're the woman and your parents are reaping havoc in your marriage, it's not their fault, it's your fault, because you don't set the boundaries. If you're the man and your mother is just looking over the shoulder and trying to take over and are just interfering in your relationship, it's your fault, not the mother-in-law's fault, because you are not setting the boundaries. Because this is now the new unity. You are the king and queen of the castle, and the door, if you open the door for people to come in without permission of your partner, then you create problems. People, you see how these practical things can break marriages. If there are expectations to be clarified in all of this, this is what it's all about. If we can take it a little further, this is probably one of the most important things, that people make mistakes in marriages. They think marriage is a hospital. Hulle dink die huwelik is 'n hospitaal. People, you don't marry a person to heal the other person. There's one thing, you cannot take a bath on the behalf of another person. You must make sure that broken people don't try to build wholesome relationships. Do your partner a favor, and that you take the pain of the past, and you leave it behind. Because if I have 2 chairs in my hand and I pick them up and want to embrace my loved one, I cannot embrace the future with 2 bags in my hand. So this whole thing of pain of the past, that you must really get rid of it, put it down, and really make sure that this is the one thing. And if there's one thing that God really brings to you, if there's one thing that God brings to you and said, well, listen, I want to make you whole. And this is what I experienced in my own life, that I do not want to enter into a relationship as a broken person and trying to make the other person to heal my wounds and to lick my wounds. No, I'm here as a person that is made whole by God. And I say, do yourself a favor and sort your stuff out with God, and then enter into a relationship. And don't expect the other person other than God to make you whole. And then, the last thing about this man-woman differences thing, this whole thing about differences and personality differences and things like this. You know, they say, this is probably, yeah, there's some hidden messages there. You know, I don't know how to share this, but some people will understand and some won't, eh? The different shapes of the heart, eh? So here you sit and you have differences. And you know they say the wedding day is the becoming one of two people. And in a bad marriage, the rest of the wedding and the marriage is to fight which one. And that is the sad thing, that people come to this point and say, this is who I am and this is who you are, and I'm not going to allow you to be who you are, I'm going to force you to be like me. And this is the way I think, and this is in all diversities. Husband-wife diversities, the way we see things differently in life, personality differences. So the introvert forces the extrovert to stay at home and not to go out. And the extrovert forces the introvert to go to parties and things like that. So there are so many differences that needs to be managed. If you can clarify these expectations and sit beforehand, you know what I ask people nowadays to do? I physically give them a list of questions. And I ask them to say, okay, over to you. Here's the list of questions. Here are the 12 issues. Go and sort out this. Wherever you get stuck, come to a counselor. When you can sort it out on your own, when you get stuck, let's then get best practices and ask the Lord. And there was a beautiful example yesterday from a lady who was married to the pastor and his wife, who said in 30 years of marriage, they had only 3 times where they couldn't go. And then they went to another senior pastor and said, but listen, we are at total loggerheads at this. And then the person did facilitation and specifically said, listen, the person I'm going to decide, and one of you is not going to be happy, but 2 Christians going to a senior Christian and say, listen, on this thing, I'm going to say the word and then you must abide with it. It is the typical thing, the good thing to do. People, is this practical enough or not? It is one thing to say, okay, there's the foundation, the reason why. I think what people need to know nowadays is how do you do all of this? I would like to close. I've got 3 or 4 minutes left. I would like to close. If you take the other hand, if you reach out to another person and say, give me your hand. One of these movies, The Greatest Showman, it is really such an emotional song there. Now I must once again try not to get emotional, because that song I always listen in the car and then I cry a tear and then I phone my wife and then I play the song to her and all those things. And this is the song that this woman said, listen, I put my hand in your hand, and it was not the most secure life of it all, because that guy in The Greatest Showman had a showman's life. It was not the normal security. But she said, and she said in that song, oh, 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 oh. And it's almost like she said, ouch, 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 ouch. But in that song, she said, I gave my hand to you, but we're walking this thing together. I want to share a story. Can I just share something personal? On our honeymoon, we were walking, and we were actually trying to walk. My wife, we went to Switzerland, and she just wanted to see. She has this thing for these cows. She calls it koolkoeien, these cows with all the different patterns on. And we couldn't see any. So we went down and looked and started to walk down to look for these things. Now, Switzerland without cows. Where are the cows? It was winter. They was all locked up. We didn't know. So now we were walking down, and it became the nightfall, and became such a dark night. And she gripped my hand. And we walked down there, and I realized this brave woman walking this long distance to me, just catching that was just such a long, tiring walk to get to the bus, get in time to get back to the hotel. I just realized I'm going to walk life with this person. People, the other night we were walking in the same dark down Lion's Head, and my wife's blind, and she gripped my hand so hard, and I told her, I said, I think we're going to get a baby. She said, why? I said, you know, the last time you've gripped my hand so hard, it was, you got a baby, we got a baby. So we were walking down there. People, there's a time in your life when you have to reach out your hand and help your partner. 2 are better than 1. That evening, it was true, 2 were better than 1. Because I could help her. But how many times this week she helped me? last night, the other night, I came back and I literally arrived. The airplane was late on Tuesday night, and I literally arrived 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and she did washing 3 o'clock in the morning to get my shirt, which I had to be color-coded for this women conference. Why do they do this? And get it right. People, there's a moment when you help the other person. I would like you now just to do two things. And Kuketsu will then lead us further in this. Take your hand. If there's a person, if you're single, do this. If you're single, do this. But if you're married to a person, if there's a person you love next to you, take that hand of that person. And make a commitment and say, I. Look that person in the eye. And say, I will clarify expectations with you, and I will commit to make them true. Come on, press that hand. I will clarify expectations with you, because what I've seen for people being married for 30 years, you know, and those 30 years ago, there were not great marriage preparation courses. It's never too late. I've seen people married for 30 years, and then for at long last, they started to clarify this, sorted out issues. I've seen people who are single, who are wise enough to listen to this and prepare themselves to when they get married one day. I see people on the verge of getting married, that they sit and they clarify this, and how are we going to handle our faith, and how are we going to handle all these differences. And the people who know that the marriage is like a fire. If you neglect it, it will either burn your house down or die. But if you maintain it, and you hold each other's hand, and the one help the other when it is needed most, at that moment, you will have something that you will have a wow experience in your vow. And that you don't want to, you will avoid the woes by not just focusing on woeing other people, but you will really focus on what God gave you, the opportunity to make this thing work. The last thing I want to say is, it is now time for commitment. That as a single person, you now commit to say, I will make sure that when I get ready one day to marry, that I am not looking for the right person, but I am the right person. That if you're in a marriage, you're not expecting the other person to make you happy, but take responsibility to make sure. You know what I ask marriage people? Is it nice to be married to you? Do you think it's nice to be married to you? With that? That you make sure that you can answer that question, it's nice to be married to you. And then that you commit finally, not only to clarify expectations, and now I expect you to fulfill these expectations, but that you clarify expectations on fidelity, on faithfulness, on how to deal with money, on how to do the communication, and how not to give each other ignoring streaks of a week long, of not how to do all these bad things, of not how to not create boundaries and allow other people in your relationship, of not getting children to interfere with your marriage, of not getting other people not holding each other back in fulfilling your life expectations and your life goals. You are there to help each other to fill your godly life purpose. And if today could have only just helped you a little bit to stimulate your mind and your heart and your spirit to focus on the how, then I pray that God will be with you in this marriage. Amen.